And there you are.
All right, welcome. Good evening. It's the City Council Workshop. Today is Wednesday, May 28th, and it's 6:09 p.m. We're on the table. We have Councillor Beck, Councillor Mallon, Councillor Fish, Councillor Dean, Councillor Fournier, myself, Council Chair Pelletier. We are joined by City Manager Deb Laurie. Our first item on the agenda is a review of municipal budget.
Yes. So I think we got to a good place last week and finalized everything, but I wanted to come back one more time and kind of go over where we sit now. At the last meeting, there was also a request for the school department to make a reduction, and that is now reflected in what is in your packet. So where we sit right now is we are sitting at an estimated tax rate of $17.75. With the lowering of the market rate adjustments, you can see at the bottom that we've done an estimate impact on the average residential homeowner. So we are now sitting at, the potential of on average $159 increase for the year, or a 3.9% increase. So to just remind folks where we started, our current tax rate is $18.55 per thousand. Obviously, tax rate is only part of the equation when you're looking at your tax bill. The other part of it is your value. And based on where the assessor, based on his work, had initially estimated, we saw a significant shift from our commercial to our residential property. So when we began the budget process, we were actually, somewhere around estimating, a $319 average impact, or 7.8%. So since this all began in early April, Phil's gone back and reviewed sort of more up-to-date market data, has made some suggested revisions. We've made some revisions on the city side of the budget based on the feedback from the council. And I think the fact that we were able to, in essence, cut the potential increase in half over the last 2 months speaks well to the process that we've undertaken. I will say that nobody should look at this and say this is exactly what the final budget result is going to say, because we may still pick up a few $1,000,000 in value. There may be some small changes, none of which will have any kind of a significant impact and will not drastically change this in any way. But it is our practice to go right up to the end and make sure that we're capturing every opportunity that we can to provide, a good benefit for our taxpayers.
Great. Questions for the city manager?
Just a general question. I'm not, having not been here, I'm not aware of. Now, the school board got the information from.
Yes.
What was their response?
I shared with the superintendent the request from the city council, and she thanked me for reaching out and letting her know.
But no indication that they would agree to it.
You all determine what you provide for tax money,
Okay,
period.
all right. I just wasn't sure if we had to have a back and forth or if it was dead in the water.
You all made a motion and
Okay. Well,
reduced the
having
school
not been
budget.
here, I
Yeah,
wasn't sure.
no, and frankly, I don't recall the last time the council ever did that, so that's okay.
And part of the reason that we wanted to bring this back for review tonight is we know there were a couple of folks who didn't make it to the last workshop. And so before you start seeing these things on the council agenda, wanted to make sure that everyone had read through it, understood where we were, and raised any potential flags or issues so we could address them before we get to council orders. So yes, that's exactly what this is for. Councilor Beck?
Sure, I just wanted some clarification, because the motion was to ask them, wasn't to appropriate 165,000 less. So I mean, is that the intention of the council, is just to, regardless what they say, we are gonna appropriate the 165,000 less?
That was the motion that was made and it passed by majority.
Sure, because I went back and listened when I heard the word ask, we're gonna ask them to.
No, I remember asking for
Yeah.
clarification, and
Okay.
it was stated that it will be cut once.
Okay. All right.
And to Council Chair Pelletier's point especially, we have a couple of newer folks and this is always a little strange, so I just figure I might as well point it out, because I won't be here to point it out. Sorry. The very first reading of the budget is always the city manager's proposed. So it's gonna look exactly like what's in the book that you got in April. And the reason is by charter, if the council fails to enact a budget,
Yeah.
by default, the city manager's budget goes into default. So we actually have a document on file that we can implement. What will happen is at your second meeting in June, you will make motions to amend virtually every budget document by substitution with the updated numbers, which will be generally this. Provided, there's a 20,000 here or a 5,000 there, so there will be some slight changes, but that is the typical process.
So one of the things that occurred to me on the way home from the last budget meeting, because it never occurs to you in the meeting. Is that we as a council had essentially said that we're adopting a budget with no new programs, no new positions. But what was included in the city manager's sheet with the recommendations for new programs and positions did not include the additional funds for additional readers at the library. And so I wanted to make sure that we as a council had an opportunity to say either, yes, we intended to keep those new readers, or no, we're gonna hold the library to the same line that we're holding everyone else, which is no expanded programs and no expanded headcount. What I didn't want was for us to pass a budget and for someone to say, well, you said no new programs, but yet there's new readers to the library. Why? And have us go, oh, we didn't think of it. So I just wanted to bring it back to the table for discussion to understand what is people's intent, so that we can be very clear on that particular line item.
And I got earlier today, I got some information from Ben, the librarian who's just talking about what the greeters do. And I called Ben to make sure my recollection was correct. So when the city allocated ARPA funds, it did it for, to fund a social worker position, and it was to fund position. They were looking at like a maintenance that would be able to do sort of the room checks and things like that and be more a visible presence. And what they found is the greeters are an actually better solution. So while they are new, if you will, on the city budget, they were positions that were previously funded through ARPA.
Councilor Trumbull?
What was the total allocation for the library from the city last year versus this year? Did that change at all?
About $138,000 more.
So we did increase the total allocation.
Correct, because we typically have treated the library just like our own
Right.
employees and in essence, almost a de facto a department, if you will. So the pay changes and things like that, they tend to follow the city's practice and policy. Typically, and then they're seeing, the increase or changes in utilities and things like that.
Councilor Dean?
So for clarification, the greeters are or are not in this current budget?
They are in my proposed budget, because typically what I do is I just, with the library, whatever the board of trustees asks to submit to the city, that's what I include in my proposed budget.
And that amount is the 53,200.
53,200 is the amount related to the greeters. The overall increase is about 138,000. The balance of those increases are, wage increases, benefit increases, and some other smaller line item changes.
Councilor Fish?
The counselor that's at the library, that I think, we funded through opera money,
Yes,
is that position one more year with that, or is this?
I believe it has one more year.
One
Yes,
more
I'm
year.
I'm looking for affirmation and I'm getting it, so.
So, my follow-up question is, if that position, like it's part-time, are we gonna be expecting next year to pick that up? Or are the greeters intended to somehow make, sort of some changes with the way that they operate to pick that up, or? Just looking at,
Yeah.
you know, 100 and something this year and then another full-time position next year.
Yeah, and I would defer to Ben on that. I think as the social workers, funding winds down, I think that's probably a discussion about whether or not that's a service the library continues, to find valuable. I don't think, I know she does a lot of outreach and interactions and connecting people to any number of resources. So I'll let you speak to that, Ben, sorry.
Sure, no, I'm happy to be here. So the 53,000 this year is for 4 part-time positions and they're paid close to minimum wage really, and it's they're very skilled people, but it's not skilled labor the way somebody with a master's degree and independent license as a social worker and all of that would be. So the social worker position would be separate. And I do hope that next year, we're coming to you with a proposal for having the social worker folded into the budget. But, right now, it's the greeters. That's what we're focused on. They have very different purposes for being in the budget. The greeters are very much about responding to conduct and responding to people's need for a place where they can check in and say, hey, I just saw something. Wow, what was that kind of moment, as well as seeing it themselves and not having the public have to report things to us. So that's the focus of that. Whereas Olivia's work, it's the social worker. She's more likely to be connecting with people like Jenna Jones and with Jen Weatherby and with the PATH team and the home team and all of the different network of people who do different kinds of things with this population, so that when somebody comes into the atrium and is nobody's seen them for a week and somebody has a housing voucher for them, she's able to make those connections happen, that kind of outreach work. So it's a different kind of work than the greeters.
Councilor Fournier?
So what was the percentage increase year over year? I just don't have those numbers in front of me, sorry.
6.7.
Okay, I didn't bring them with me either.
Councilor Dean?
Were these greeters fairly consistent from the beginning, or do you have a high turnover?
They're pretty consistent. We had one greeter take on an additional position outside of the library that reduced her hours at the library, and we hired a 4th. But aside from that, it's been the same crew for the time we've had greeters.
And how many hours a week are they working?
It's changed from time to time as we've changed what our atrium hours are, but right now, the coverage that they cover is from 9 in the morning until 6 at night. And that's Monday through Thursday, and then 9 to 5 on Friday and Saturday until we go to summer hours. And then so that equates to some people working like 20 hours a week and other people working more what we term casual, where they work fewer hours, enough hours that they don't qualify for being part-timers, even fewer hours than that. So like 12 hours or 10 hours.
So approving this as is would keep the number of greeters flat. It would not add
Yes.
greeters, it would just shift how they're being paid for.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are there any other questions? Councilor Trumbo?
I just comment, I think where this is, I mean, if we were having a discussion about adding anything to the budget now, I would maybe feel differently where this is in the budget right now, we're gonna, which we've talked about. And I think, in my opinion, the library's been adversely impacted by what's been going on in the community more than a lot of other organizations. And I think the greeters are giving people a more comfort level to go into the library. I think taking the greeters away at this time would be very detrimental. And I think that might have been helpful to the librarian being named the librarian of the year.
Librarian of the
Yeah, that happened too.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much.
So is Councilor Mello?
Nothing to do with the library, but I'm curious now. Just popped into my little head that we're saying that basically the budget, we didn't hire anyone new. Yet under the downtown development, didn't we now assume her full pay? The director, who
we
was
have-
paying it before?
We have, yeah, we've been paying that for,
That's not what she said.
well, she's mistaken.
Well, then I guess what I need to know is where was the money coming from before? Did we just flat out pay? I thought we paid 50% of it. Did the other 50
It's
come
around
from TIF?
$43,000. I can't tell you what her salary is in total.
It went to a full-time position. is what
Yes,
happened.
right.
Oh, okay, but
That's why I
we're
changed.
still only paying $43,000.
Yeah.
We're paying the same amount we
Right.
have been.
But someone had to pick up the other portion. I'm trying to find out where, who got it, because is it in someone else's budget? And then therefore we are increasing employment.
So it's paid for through the special, so the downtown development district has a
understand that.
separate budget.
Yes,
So it is, comes out of their assessment.
the whole of of her salary, the full-time position?
No, 43,000 still comes from downtown tip.
Okay,
it
so
has been
essentially the
historically.
cities, we didn't increase the amount coming from the TIF is what
We
you're
did
saying.
not,
They just picked up the difference?
correct.
Okay, it doesn't show that well, and I was curious
Yeah.
about it.
Okay, I don't
Are you
think-
looking for a motion or something?
I don't know. I mean, if people are fine with this as is, I don't think we need another motion. But if anyone wants to make a change, then yes, we should take a motion. I don't see any motions. Okay, we're in good shape. Thank you. Any other additional comments, questions, clarification on the budget?
Thank
Okay,
you.
city manager updates.
Yes. So a couple of quick items. We've been notified and have heard a couple of different ways that the Federal Department of Labor has decided to halt enrollment at both Loring and Penobscot Job Corps. So the impact in Bangor, if you will, is that is a loss of 130 jobs and it impacts 250 students. And I didn't know if the council would be interested in submitting some sort of letter in support of maintaining Job Corps locations, especially the one here in Bangor. I'm seeing nodding.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Do you know approximately how many of the students are local? And
I-
remain here after?
I don't know.
Most of them live on
Campus.
campus, so they're at least local while they're students. My understanding, I did a tour last year with their director, is that most of them stay in the Bangor area, maybe not Bangor exactly.
No, they're.
Yeah, in the area.
All right, I just wanted to point out that we have not lost sight of the desire of the council to have a public discussion about 287G agreements. But we've really been working to kind of get through the budget process. I will also point out that Representative Rana's bill LD 1258 seemed to have a very positive response in Augusta. I think today, the work session was today at 1 o'clock. So it looks like the state may be taking some action as well. So it would be really, you don't want to delay the conversation too long, but it would be really great to see kind of what direction the state is going to head in this. But I just didn't want you to think we'd lost track of that.
I do agree that it would make sense to see what direction the state is headed before we decide what to do. I think even the town of Wells was holding
Yes.
off on their new ordinance
Yes.
until they figured out what the state was doing, so.
Yes.
I've also heard the rumblings that the legislature may adjourn earlier than in previous years, so we may not be waiting too long before we have an answer.
And then I would say in the interim, if there's a desire to align a city policy with what the state law will be, you have the opportunity to do that because obviously the enactment of a state law can be a very lengthy process.
Thank you.
Downtown parking alerts. Oops. So it's not quite clear to me. It just appears that, somebody took a text alert, being careful about text fatigue very literally. We've had conversations that if we are going to post places as no parking and there's going to be potential to tow, we will notify and send out alerts. So we've had some clarification around that issue. The last item I had is, as we enter in, obviously, into a spring, summer season. And in providing the same direction to the various staff that work within our public spaces, that our public parks, we will not allow individuals to set up camp in our public parks. Our public parks close at night. We're gonna keep our parks and open spaces available to everyone in the community. As for other city-owned property, so if we find someone who is set up in, Davenport Park, we're gonna say to them, you have to leave and you have to leave now. If we come across individuals on other city property, we will give folks 24 hours notice, which has been our practice. And we've kind of made sure to coordinate and consolidate that everybody's using the same messaging. They'll have the same resources to provide. They'll provide the same offers of alternate and opportunities, as we do to everybody. We will allow the department heads flexibility, that if there are extenuating circumstances, that they have some latitude. To kind of help with, let's just say that, it's not unusual that somebody says, what, so-and-so is gonna be here on Thursday for me. Okay, we're not gonna disrupt your life for that, provided you're respectful and appropriate and not representing a danger to a neighborhood or something like that. So I just want to reiterate that we're gonna continue that practice in the coming year. So that's all I had.
We're starting to get concerns from downtown business owners and residents about the proliferation of shopping carts just being left places. I know the last few times I've driven by Pierce Park, it
Yeah.
seems that there have been
They've been multiplying the last few days.
shopping carts there, and I don't know if they're sort of parked in Pierce Park because people are in the library, or if people are just leaving them there for a time during the day and then
Okay.
coming back to them. But it would be nice if we could make sure that there aren't lots of overflowing shopping carts in our
Yeah.
city parks.
Yes. I'll make sure that the folks that are out checking the areas pay special attention to that.
Counselor Dean?
Have we stepped up the policing or the cleaning of the public restrooms?
I haven't talked to Tracy. I knew that we had added and reached out to Wabanaki Public Health. So Wabanaki Public Health, who's doing our syringe pickup, is making sure to stop there on a regular basis to make sure that syringe waste doesn't become an issue. But I can have Tracy come back to you with what that looks like.
I stopped into the restroom on Harlow on Monday.
Yeah.
There were 2 needle caps, but no needles.
Good.
Nothing was tampered with outside. There's a little bit of trash, but not bad.
Good.
They did have toilet paper,
All
but
right.
it looks like maybe somebody kicked the door because there was a dent in the
Yeah,
door.
we struggle with doors and springs. That seems to be the two most abused items.
Mhm.
Counselor Fish?
It's been, how long have these been out? Less than a year, about 9
Yep.
months.
Yep.
And, the reason we made them portable was to kind of
Yep.
be able to evaluate how it was going.
Yep.
So, how are we going to know really how effective they are and,
Okay.
the expense and the labor and the servicing of them versus,
Yeah.
how well is it going or not going? Just so we have an idea as we
Sure.
move forward with them.
I'll ask Tracy to come to it, and I'm looking at Courtney because she's on it. She was writing, so we'll have Tracy come do a GovOps, do an update.
Counselor Mellon?
We have 6-foot parties, right?
Yes,
And we're using 4.
yes,
Now, in the budget.
Yes.
The maintenance of them
Yes.
is maintenance for 4 or for 6?
I believe it's probably for 4 at this point, because I don't believe he went up to 6 in his budget. I believe he just added sort of the spend down from the ARPA funds.
So it's like.
Yeah.
25 or 26, $27,000 a year per party.
I'll have Tracy make that as part of his update, so you've got all the details.
Which seems like a lot. $500 a week,
I believe they're stopping 2 and 3 times a week.
but still $500 a week.
Where do you work from?
No, I wouldn't have them there.
Other updates?
No,
Any other questions for the city manager? Last chance.
that's right. So you want a fun fact?
Sure.
Okay, my fun fact of the night is, I estimate that this is my 240th council meeting. So when you have nothing to do at night, you know, because you don't want to watch what's on TV, you sit and say, on average, how many council meetings have I been to?
All right, we're adjourned.